So you mentioned a second ago, and I do want to talk about this a little more because, again, it's a big news item, but it also shows the gravity of this situation, and that's the colony collapse disorder. So can you tell us just a little more about that? What is that? Why did it send the alarm bells, and where are we kind of now with that?
Sure. So the first thing to understand is that a colony is a group of bees, right? People will look at a hive. A hive is actually just where they live. Mm-hmm. So the colony itself is the population of the bees.
In the hive.
If it's a hive. Exactly.
Right.
So the hive is the home. The colony is
the people.
The residents.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening a few years back was that one farmer blew the whistle. And he was a guy in the U.S. in the South. And all of a sudden he realized that his bees were just dying in massive quantities. And what happens is the people who run the apiaries, what they'll do is they'll rent out their beehives throughout the year, and the bees will work as pollinators within the fields. And we see them when we drive up and down the highways here, big white boxes of the traditional Langstroth hives that are out in the fields.
Right.
So he noticed that his bees were dying in mass. And he immediately raised the flag and said, what is going on here? Well, it turned out that had been happening in several places around the world, but no one talked about it. Mm-hmm. And when they finally interviewed all these other farmers who had lost, or these apiaries who had lost all their bees, they didn't say anything because they felt shame. They felt that they had done something wrong. Right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, science starts to dig in. And science says, what is actually causing this? And what's come about, and we've learned this over the last, say, 6 to 8 years, is that it is chemical based. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is
the causes are chemical based.
The causes are chemical based.
Right.
So what ends up happening is that the farmers have to spray pesticides, herbicides, insecticides on the plants, right? There are several companies, we won't mention them by name because I don't think we want lawsuits, that
and everybody knows
specializes. Yeah, it's the same people that brought us Agent Orange.
Right.
So they specialize in creating these compounds, and they use it now as treatment. Well, what ends up happening is the EPA in the U.S. will deem it as bug safe, bee safe, et cetera.
Right.
Safe is an interesting word because I'm not going to take a glass of their elixir and drink it, right?
Or vaporize it in your home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what they said is we can basically live with the amount of casualties that we see, right? Mm-hmm. We'll call that safe.
Yep.
And it was given to these farmers to use on their crops. The farmers were supposed to use only one type at a time. The farmers ended up layering. So all of a sudden you've got one herbicide, one pesticide, one insecticide that are all quote unquote safe by themselves, and they're using multiple because they have different purposes. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is these GMO-based seeds, some of them ended up getting coated ahead of time. And it was on purpose. They said, let's actually coat the seed and we'll grow in all of those defenses within the plant itself.
Oh, wow.
And so as the bees and birds
and butterflies, right.
Yep. They would get into it, and it turned out that their immune system couldn't handle it.
Right.
So what's happened to date since we found all of this out is there's been a lot of fighting about, is the science real, et cetera.
And we're largely talking about, I suspect, and I'm going to try to say this, the neonicotinoids?
Neonicotinoids.
Is that the main thing that we're talking about here?
So what you'll hear a lot.
It's a family, I think, of
it's
herbicides.
A family, and you'll hear the glyphosates and whatnot.
Right,
and
those two.
That ties into that family, right, of chemicals.
Yep.
So what ended up happening during Obama era is in the U.S., a lot of bans were put in place. The EPA was actually sued. And so the EPA lost a major lawsuit saying that they just did not protect wildlife, right? Mm-hmm. So Obama era law went into place to ban all these substances. And most recently, under a new administration, let's just call it that, these bans were actually rolled back. Mm-hmm. The good news is several of these garden centers that we know by name, the biggest one of all being Ace Hardware, they have voluntarily taken most of this off of their shelves.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. And because in Europe, I know that they're way ahead of us in outlawing these chemicals. And I saw when I was researching for today, it said that certain states have enacted some laws, but at a national level, like you said, a lot of that's been rolled back.
Yeah.
And so it becomes more of a grassroots thing to get the vendors, the retailers to take those sorts of actions. So it's great that there's some progress in that area. But yeah, scary. Okay.